And we are live. Welcome everybody to this special week. We are doing a special interview showcase all week long, every day from 1 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Well, I should say 1 o'clock and 8 o'clock. I'm definitely not doing 8-hour interviews all day. But welcome. If you're here, I'm Jonathan Milligan, author of the new book, Your Message Matters, How to Rise Above the Noise and Get Paid for What You Know. I'm excited to be here. I've got a special guest I'm going to be bringing on in just a second. But first, I want to know who's here with me tonight. Go ahead and put your first name and where you're watching from. We're currently broadcasting this in 6 different locations across Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. So wherever you're watching from, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Go ahead and let us know that you are watching and that you're here. All right, tonight I'm really excited about this. By the way, earlier today there's a great interview we did with Carrie Oberbrunner. If you don't know Carrie, what an encourager he was and such a great interview. Go check that out. But tonight I'm really excited to, in just a second, I'm going to bring on Bob Lotich. He's been a good friend for a long time, and we have similar paths, kind of where we got started, and boy, have things changed over time. And he's also working on a brand new book. He's got a traditional book deal in the works, and maybe we'll talk about that tonight as well. So I see we got Rich here from Michigan. Welcome, Rich. Randy's watching. Also, Grand Rapids, Michael Ward is here on YouTube. Michael, I heard that you recently contracted COVID, and hope you are doing well, my friend, out there in Arizona. Stay well. And yeah, so whoever's watching, if you're here, go ahead and let us know you're here, that you're watching. We're excited to have you here all week long. We're talking to people who either blog or they podcast or they coach, or they take their message and their passion and they're sharing it online and making a living from it. And we've also interviewed, or are going to be interviewing, people who are kind of in the middle of their process as well. So you're going to get to hear from people who are already doing this full time, as well as people who have been doing it maybe just a few months, and hear some of their stories and some of the challenges and also some of the wins that they've had already as well. All right, guys, so I'm going to bring on Bob Lotich. And when I met Bob, it was actually trying to get a guest post. I was actively seeking out a guest post, being a guest post on other blogs. And that's how I first met Bob, is he was kind enough to allow me to write an article for his blog in the Christian personal finance space. Back then it was called christianpf.com. It's now Seed Time. And it's been amazing to just watch his growth over time and all the amazing things that he's doing. And what's pretty cool is we both started off as bloggers, and I think now we are all in all of it, whether it's a podcast or it's a video or it's doing interviews and live streaming. So I'm really excited to bring Bob on as well. And so let's jump right into it. I'm going to move over, and then I got to call Bob into the show here. I've got him right here. Let me just bring him in. There he is.
Ready?
Bob, How are you doing?
Doing good, man. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, my friend. You staying warm up there in Tennessee?
Got a sweater. Doing great, brother. Can't beat it.
Awesome. Well, man, it's so good to connect with you for a little while. And you
Mhm.
guys want to know a quick little story? Like way back in the day in 2011, when I started bloggingyourpassion.com, I was like, I don't want to do this by myself. And I kind of roped Bob's, grabbed Bob's arm and said, come over here, Bob. And
Yep.
we did that for a few years. And
Yep.
Bob's business is
Blast.
just, yeah, it was a blast getting it started. And Bob's business has just blown up and taken off. And it's just been amazing to watch. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about tonight, too. And so I guess the place to start, Bob, is just people here watching, they don't know who you are. Can you just kind of give
Mhm.
us a little bit about you?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, started as a blogger, now doing all the things, and we basically help people earn more money, save more money, build wealth, and do it for the kingdom of God, do it for God's glory. So we're focused towards Christian audience, but really trying to pull out, extract a lot of this timeless wisdom about money that's wrapped up in the Bible, and that's always kind of been my passion. And so, that's where all this meets together, I guess.
Yeah, and on that, I love kind of how it started. If you would share a little bit of kind of the origin story, and actually, you gave me permission to actually put the story in here. You don't have to tell the whole story, but I really like the part about kind of you had a basically, and I'll let you explain it, but you had a corporate job. You were, I guess we could call it in the rat race, right?
Yeah.
But yet, I think there was like this yearning to do something else. And from what I remember, it kind of started from this idea of like posting a proverb and talking about a proverb each day and related to finance. And you didn't even know it at the time, but you figured out later that it already kind of had a name. It was called a blog. And so, can you talk about that?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is 2007. And yeah, a lot of people didn't know what a blog was. I was one of them. And I was talking to a friend of mine, just sharing this idea. I was passionate about money. We were a mess financially and trying to get out of our debt and all this stuff. And at the same time, I was reading what the Bible said about all this stuff and finding this fascinating intersection of the two. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to start a website, not a blog, but a website where every day I'm gonna go up there and manually put up a new thing so some people can find it. And a friend of mine enlightened me and said, "That's a blog, buddy. I know you don't know what that is clearly, but that's a blog." And there's software that makes it a little bit easier for you. So that's kind of how the whole thing got started.
Yeah, that's such a great story, and it's funny how just like simple little things that it's just like a little. There's this little urge or this little creativity, that little
Mhm.
idea that we want to do, and because I know some of your story, can you talk about like how it went from well, this is kind of a creative outlet kind of thing to um, the transitioning of, man, I want to put more time and energy in this. And it was kind of like you were given that opportunity with the job, the way that the job
Yeah.
change was happening, and maybe talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So yeah, I never recommend this to people when they're saying, "Oh, I want to become a full-time podcaster, or full time blogger, or whatever." But my story was one that I had been blogging for about a year, and it was about at that point that I got a pink slip from the company I was working for. I was working for a big financial services company, and this is 2007. So a lot of them were buying other ones out. Mine got bought out. Long story short, our entire department got a pink slip. And so I had about a 6 month kind of heads up before like my job would be completely gone. And um, and so as soon as I got the pink slip, I started looking for another job. It's like that's makes sense. That's what you do. And so I started doing that. And then somewhere in that, I talked to my wife. We started praying about this whole thing, and I realized that I just started to feel like I wasn't supposed to look for another job, and I was supposed to work on this blog full time, which seemed insane because we couldn't even pay the electric bill barely with our blog at that point. And but yet that was what we ended up doing. So I ended up getting laid off and then just went full time into blogging without making very much money at all. And over the next 9 months, just kind of continued to ramp it up to the point that we were making more from the blog than my day job. So it's not the path I typically recommend, but it's the path that's our story, and that's kind of how we got there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you get the emails like I get the emails of like, hey, I lost my job. I want to make a go at this blogging thing. How can I do it in the next
Yep.
30, 60 days? And my advice is get a job.
Yeah.
And because this is not, there is no easy button.
Mhm.
There is no like instant overnight. It's gonna just drop into your bank account. Back in the day, Bob, we used to always tell people it's brick by brick, right? You got to do it
Yeah.
brick by brick.
And it
But
takes a
it's
while to build a building. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like any other business, right? It's like any other business. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes effort. But this can be a real thing. But you have to kind of go into it. And I know for me, it was like, if this takes 2 to 5 years to build, just so I can enjoy it for the next 20 or 30, it's worth the extra time,
Yeah.
energy, and effort to do it. And I think that's so important because I think what happens is if you don't have the long term understanding or strategy, what's going to happen is you're going to become quickly discouraged because you're going to do 2 or 3 blog posts and then you're not going to get any comments, or you're going to you're going to do something and not get any kind of response, and you'll be like, see, no one's paying attention. But these things take time to build, and it takes time to be consistent over it. And I mean, today more than ever, we've got blogging, you got a podcast, you can do a live stream show. I mean, there's just stuff popping up all over, and I think that's so important that people get that. What do you think was one of, looking back, what was one of the big challenges, whether it was mindset or just, maybe you didn't know how to do things? I know it's a question I get a lot is, when you first kind of got started, what were some of your biggest challenges?
Yeah. Tech stuff. I was not very techy. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. And then the other thing was I had this terrible fear of the business stuff, the taxes and all the government registering a business, all this stuff. And I was so terrified of that. And that just like hung me up for years. And both of them, I've come to realize just aren't that big of a deal. And not that you don't want to pay taxes. I'm not all saying that, but what I've come to find out is that there's a lot of people who do no or do zero due diligence when starting a business. I used to work at a bank, and we had all these really small sole proprietors come in, long guys, fireworks companies, like, and I guarantee you, none of these guys ever thought anything about registering a business, whatever, any of this stuff. And what probably happened is they got a letter from the IRS, that they did something wrong. And anyway, I'm going off a tangent here, but the point is I was paralyzed in fear of that. And I've talked to a lot of other people who are afraid to start a business because they don't know how to do this or how to get an EIN or whatever. And it's like, just start your business. You'll figure that stuff out, or you can hire someone to do it. Like, don't let that hold you up. And then the other thing I mentioned was the tech stuff. And it's like, that's the same way. It's like, you can hire somebody on Fiverr, on Upwork, who can handle every tech thing that you can't do now, and probably for pretty cheap. So it's just not a really valid, I don't know. It just shouldn't be a roadblock anymore, but it was, it was a pretty big one for me for a while.
Yeah, and that's that's like something I hear a lot is like, and you've probably heard it too, where someone's like, I can't figure out how to fix a design on my website, or I've tried to get it to do this, and I'm like, if you go post a job on Upwork, I promise you, like within a couple hours, you're gonna have about 10 applications, and you're probably gonna have somebody who can do it for $10 in 30 minutes, and like you spent a whole day trying to figure this thing out. I remember even
Yep.
one time I went and posted, and I don't know if you can do this anymore, but one of the people who saw my job posting to fix something, he actually messaged me and he goes, "Hey, I'm just going to give you the code. Here it is. You don't need to pay somebody for this. Just go put this in." And I went, "Okay." I went and put it in, and I'm like, "Okay, it worked." So I mean, there are people who know this stuff, this tech
Yeah.
stuff, that we don't have to get so bogged down on. So
Yep.
that's so true. So this week I'm calling it "Live Your Passion" because
Mm.
especially all that we've been through in 2020 and just a lot of difficulties and hardships and discouragement and there's people feeling like maybe recession's looming, the future still unknown. when are we ever going to get over this? Is now the time to do something that I want to do, be passionate about, and I think what happens, Bob, and you've probably seen this too, is like whenever there's this unsettling, it kind of sometimes wakes people up to the fact that maybe this story that I'm living is not one that I want to continue to live, and I want to start something else.
Yeah.
And so, why do you think it's important for people to kind of to listen to that? Because you heard that like creative call, we could say. You didn't
Hmm.
know what it fully meant, but you did start taking a step.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason to do it is kind of what you mentioned earlier, just this idea that um, if you're not excited about what you're doing, it's hard to stick it out, you know? We've all seen the people who, whatever, are starting blogs about beanie babies who have no interest in that or whatever the hot thing is at the time because they think that can be profitable. And, and that can work for some people, I guess. But at the end of the day, I don't, I never set out just to run a business and just to make money. Like, I really want to enjoy my life. Like,
Yeah.
why not? And then also, I want to have impact. And one of the chapters I'm writing on the book that you mentioned right now is about that idea that when you are doing something you're passionate about, like the people who do that are the ones who really change the world.
Mm.
It's the ones who are doing something that they absolutely love and they're not doing it just for the money. Like those are the ones who really make a dent in the world and make an impact. And that's what I want to be, and I think that's what we all want to do and be. But it's hard to not just chase the money sometimes when you have to pay the bills. But oftentimes, like that's how you get there. You got to make that sacrifice up front, putting in the legwork before you can get to that point where the money isn't as much of an issue, I guess.
Absolutely. And it's what I like to say is like it's the passion that is the deep well you can draw from, especially those pre-profit days of your business. Like looking
Yeah.
back for me, it was like I don't know. I found this creative outlet of writing and sharing and wanting to help people with a career coach blog. And, it was a whole year. I wasn't making any money, but I was posting every week and I was making a little bit of AdSense money. But then in a 12-month time frame, things really began to start building because of all the consistent work back
Yeah.
then that I had done the year before by just being consistent. And we all start in obscurity, right?
Yeah.
It's like every creative entrepreneur you admire, you can trace their story back to obscurity. Like I think of John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire. He had this crazy idea that nobody was doing, and that was to post a daily podcast. And it was going to be an interview of an entrepreneur. I mean, it's insane. He had his whole mastermind telling him, John, that is the worst idea. That is the dumbest idea to do that. And boy, were they wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he did interview after interview after interview. He didn't start off with a bunch of downloads and people paying attention, but he was just so passionate about because he said he was driving around town and he couldn't find enough podcasts about being an entrepreneur, and he's like, I'm just gonna do one that's every single day. And I think that's so important that we identify something that we love and that we're passionate about, and it can make money, but it can also make an impact as well. So I love that. So maybe talk about. I want to talk about the book. I think that's where I'd like to know. I know you're in the middle of it. I don't know exactly where you're at with it in the manuscript. I admire now that I've gone through this process from a traditionally published route. I admire every single author and every single book. I think no traditionally published author should ever get a 1-star review because they put a lot of time, energy, and effort into writing a book. And
Yeah. True.
can you talk about the book a little bit? I'd love for people
Sure.
to hear about it.
Yeah. So just so you know where I am in the process, my manuscript's due tomorrow, believe it or not.
And you said
Um,
yes to hanging out with me. What are you thinking?
a little bit crazy, but I'm squeezing it in. It's all good. No, I've been working all day. I'll be working afterwards all day tomorrow, but we'll get it done. So I'm really pumped. It's coming together very well. And Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a big project. I've been working on this for almost 2 years now.
Mm.
And the last year, really the last 4 or 6 months have been the intense kind of crunch time. Um, but yeah, it's been a huge, huge project. And then the other part, which, I'm sure you are aware of or would testify to, I guess, is that it's not a one-man job. Like there are so many people who have contributed to this and who have added so much already. And the publisher hasn't even seen it yet. And I have this big long list of acknowledgments of people who have been part of the process. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a really, really big project, but I'm really excited about it. It's kind of, I'm seeing it as the new foundation of our business, which, from what I think you and I have talked about, it seems like that's kind of how it's working out for you as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and I like that. It's forced me to really think through and wrestle with some of these ideas and concepts in a way that I never have before, because I'm getting them in print and it can't be changed nearly as easy as a Kindle book. Like, um, it's a different thing. And so it forces you to like just really fight through and really understand what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And what I love about it is like for me, it really pushed me and challenged me to think about principles,
Mm,
especially me writing a book in, the online business space. I mean, the moment you mention an app or even a social media site or a tool, I mean, it's gonna be phased out in 4 or 5 years. It could be nothing,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so I really stayed away from that and tried to stay with like principles. But the cool thing about that is, like you said, it really helps to create this solid foundation for like your other teaching beyond the book that you're
yep,
going to be able to really make a
exactly.
difference and impact lives. And what I love about it too is a book is an opportunity to take somebody's like 10 years of experience with some
Hmm.
topic and like get it like in a summary form and 250 pages. And that's why, I mean, I'm going to be wanting the book because it's like taking all of Bob's wisdom and really just getting that sucker down into a couple hundred pages, which is awesome. Do you have a title yet? Or are you still like finalizing
And we are still working on title.
that?
I wish we had a title. We're not there yet.
Well, we started with one and then they came back with another and then we ended up compromising and finding middle ground. So I know what that
Hmm.
process is like.
Yeah.
Um, that's awesome. Do you have like a potential publication date or?
Yeah, I think about a year from now. I think January, February 22 is probably what's coming out.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, what else is going on for you, kind of wrapping things up that this year that you're excited about? So the book's next
Yeah.
year. Anything else that you've been working on, projects or just something you're doing in your business?
Yeah, I mean, the book has been the primary focus. The only other thing we're really focused on right now, we kind of stumbled upon this, and this is a lesson in it of itself. I spent 6 or 7 years blogging about what I thought our people wanted to hear. And I finally did a survey and just kind of asked them, like, what are you struggling with the most? And then they told me. One of the things was budgeting. And they told me like 3 or 4 different things. And budgeting was number one. And then I created courses on like the number 2 and 3 and 4 thing they said, but never budgeting. And they all did fine. But then just last year, we created a course on the budgeting thing. And we have this kind of non-traditional alternative kind of method to, and it's very different than all the budgeting stuff out there. And so anyway, it's done really, really well. By far the best product we've ever created, and it's simply because we listened to what our audience wanted.
Yeah.
We didn't do just what I wanted to do. Finally, took me a while to get there, but we did what they needed and what they wanted. So we answered in response to them. And so anyway, and as a result, the course has done really, really well. And our students have just been getting really great results. And so we're kind of going all in on that. And that's going to be a big focus this year.
I love that. I love that. I committed to that process about 2 or 3 years ago now, maybe three now. And I was looking for like, what's the glaring thing I'm missing? And it was like, maybe it was like this for you. I don't know. It was like a smack myself in the head moment
Yeah.
where
Yep.
literally for me, it was people saying, I don't know what my niche is. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I've always been like, here's how you buy your domain. Here's how you start your blog. Here's how, the stuff that
Yeah.
you and I first started doing with Blogging Your Passion University originally. Well, as that course began to get bigger and bigger, and it was more like a $1,200 course, people were like, I don't want to invest in a $1,200 course if I don't know what my niche is. So we went
Yep.
back to the drawing board and created a course called Discover Your Blog Niche. And that was like a game changer. I mean, it was like easy to like put it out there and people wanted it. And so I think that's
Yep.
a great lesson for everybody listening is it doesn't matter what size your audience is, be surveying and asking people because we think as, the subject matter expert that we are close enough to the information, we look at it all the time, we write it about all the time, that we know what people are struggling with, but there might be something that you're just not really paying that close attention to. So that's a great example.
Yep. Yep.
As we wrap things up, I want you two questions. Question number one is if somebody's watching right now, and there's lots of great comments, by the way. Somebody gave you a shout out for your What We Believe post that they really like.
Thanks, Fred.
What would you say for somebody who's kind of on the fence? So they're in that place we were talking about earlier, like maybe now's not the right time. It's not the right time to write the book or start a website, start a podcast. The uncertainty of the economy or I don't know. I'm just on the fence. I'm just kind of watching and observing. What advice would you give?
The advice, I think the big thing is like, what's the downside? I think that's the question to ask. Evaluate the risk from what happens if I do this? What's the worst thing that'll happen? And what happens if I don't do it? Like, where am I going to be in 10 years looking back if I don't do this thing and always wonder what would have happened, And so I think that's an important thing to evaluate when you're struggling about whether or not you should do it. And then the other part of that I think is kind of tied in is that I think a lot of us, and I remember feeling this way at the very beginning, feel like, well, there's already big people out there who are making a big impact. And so my voice isn't necessary. I don't matter. I can never get a big audience or whatever. And none of that stuff matters. This is the thing, and I remember you talking about this too, Jonathan, like we both talked about, but this idea that you have a message to say, or you have something in you, and there's someone else in the world who needs to hear what you have to hear. And maybe there's multiple people, and maybe there's hundreds of people, maybe there's thousands, maybe there's tens of thousands. But even if it's just one person and you have a huge impact in their life, like that's a big, big deal. And, there are certain emails I've gotten from readers that I treasure and that I will remember to my dying day because of the impact that something I got to be part of made in their life. And that's really, really fun when you get to have that experience. And that those things are far more valuable than, any numbers I've seen in Google Analytics or anything like that. It's those precious moments where I can see the impact that something that I put my hand to has had in someone else's life. And that can happen on a very small scale. Like you don't need a big audience. You don't need any of that stuff. That can happen with a very tiny blog, very tiny podcast or whatever. And so it's worth going after,
I love that. I love that. And I think your story is a great example. I mean, what if Bob said, oh, well, there's already Dave Ramsey, or there's already a Susie Orman, right? There's all these like personal finance voices out there. Who am I to compete against them and to try to carve out something? All these other people are already doing it. And I mean, your story proves that wrong because of the amazing success and the traffic and the accolades. And, I know you wouldn't, you're not a kind of person to brag, but I've seen them, just the ability to be on the different shows that you've been on and the media exposure. And it's been an amazing thing to watch. And that's just proof that there's plenty. If you have an abundance mindset, and if you truly just focus on helping people, knowing that there's going to be people that they're not going to connect with the Dave Ramsey, but they're going to love a Bob Lotich. And that's going to be like, this guy's my guy. He gets me. This is my thing. And so I think that's so super important. Well, as we wrap this up, we got to get you back writing that book so we can get it to the publisher. Where can people connect with you?
Seedtime.com. we have just recently put together this free kit of a whole bunch of stuff that you can get. So if you want to start moving forward with your finances, building your wealth, all that, we have that available there. Instagram at Seed Time, or we have Seed Time Money Podcast, any of the above.
Awesome. So guys, January, this is a perfect time to like start getting your finances in order. I know it's a big time for a lot of people. They're like, spent too much money on Christmas. I got to get things back in order. Go grab his kit, seedtime.com. Well, Bob, thanks for being here, friend.
Appreciate it, Jonathan. Take care, brother.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. We're going to be doing more of these as we go along this week, and I hope Bob's story was a real inspiration to you. And thank you again for being here and hanging out with us as well. And we'll have this recording up, and we're going to be sharing this also with the list in the days ahead. And thank you for being here. We'll see you guys. Have a good night. Bye-bye.